I was erased twice, but not today. The cameras panned across the audience, but none of them knew who I was. Not really. Not the decorated officers seated in the front row. Not the press waiting to scribble history into tomorrow's headlines. And certainly not my family, huddled around their living room TV, expecting to see someone else. I wasn't even supposed to be here. According to them, I was a failure, a ghost in their family tree. They erased me once when I left. They erased me again when they used my name for someone else's gain. But today, as the president walked to the podium and paused, he looked out into the crowd and said my name, loud, clear, unmistakable. And this time, the whole world heard it. I arrived home 20 years too late. Not because the roads were long, but because silence had made the distance infinite. The cab dropped me at the edge of our old gravel driveway in Pennsylvania. The house hadn't changed, the white siding, the cracked stone path, the wind chimes that still played the same song I used to fall asleep to as a child. And yet the air smelled different, cold, sterile, like a place that had forgotten its own history. I stood for a long moment, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, a small box of keepsakes in the other hand, candles I made on deployment, a coin from a now-defunct unit, and a photo of me in uniform on the day I took my first oath. When Amber opened the door, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Natalie?" Her voice was thin, stretched across years of not saying my name. I forced a smile. Didn't think I'd need an invitation. She stepped aside slowly, but her eyes flicked down to my uniform. Not dress blues, just fatigues, pressed and clean. My best, but not enough. Inside, the kitchen smelled like apples and lemon cleaner. Mom stood by the stove, chopping something. Dad was at the coffee machine, staring at his phone. They both looked up and froze. No one moved. No one said welcome home. No one ran to hug me. "You didn't call," Mum said at last. "I wanted it to be a surprise." Dad set his mug down. "You just got out?" "Last month," he nodded. "Didn't bring much." "Where's the car?" I asked. "The Thunderbird?" A long silence. "Sold it," he said finally. "Last year." My heart fell. That car was in my name. "It was in our garage," he countered. "We needed the space." I clenched my jaw. My mouth tasted like metal. I turned to Mom. "You didn't even tell me." "We didn't think it mattered," she said, not looking at me. "You were gone." Amber hovered in the background, her phone in her hand. I didn't know either. I walked deeper into the house, glancing at the walls. Photos of Amber's wedding, Amber's graduation, Amber and Mum at some vineyard. No sign of me. Until I saw it, a dusty frame, crooked and half hidden behind a spice rack. A photo of me in uniform, 19 years old, nerves in my posture and hope in my eyes. Once it hung in the living room, now it lived behind the paprika. Dad turned toward me, arms crossed. "You chose your path, Natalie. Discipline, military, that life. We respected that." I stood taller. "I gave you 20 years. "No one asked you to," he said, flat. "You chose that over family." The weight of his words settled like concrete on my chest. I looked around again, searching for any trace that I'd once belonged here. There was a photo album on the shelf near the hallway. I pulled it down without asking. My fingers flipped through the pages like they were turning through someone else's life. Amber's baby shower, her promotion at the bank, family trips to the Poconos, holiday dinners. Not once did my face appear. "I sent you letters," I said quietly. "From every base I was stationed, every country, I sent gifts." Mom gave a slow shrug. "We never asked you to do that." I snapped the album shut and turned toward the hallway. I need to get some air. But something on the floor caught my eye, a small wooden crate tucked halfway beneath the stairwell. I crouched and pulled it out. It was my old keepsake box. A dull brass latch held it closed, the same one I used when I left for basic. I opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of unopened letters, neatly tied with fading blue ribbon. My own handwriting stared back at me, postmarked from Afghanistan, Germany, South Korea. None of them had been opened. Not one. I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry. I pulled out a letter at random, the one I sent after my first deployment ended. I remembered writing it on a tin desk under flickering light, hands shaking from exhaustion, hoping Mum would be proud. The seal was untouched. "They were mine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You kept them, but you never read them." Dad didn't respond. "Why?" I asked, turning to Mum. She turned back to the sink. "You made your choice." Amber stepped forward then, maybe to defend them, maybe to explain, but her eyes flicked to the box and something in her expression shifted. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. I didn't care anymore. I stood. My voice came out harder than I expected. "You didn't lose a daughter. You threw one away." As I headed for the door, my hand brushed against the photo behind the spice rack. I lifted it free and stared at that younger version of myself, the one who still believed effort was enough. I placed the photo on the kitchen counter, right between the apples and the lemon cleaner. "If you ever wonder why Eliza never came to visit," I said, "it's because she already knows who her family is." Then I walked out. No one stopped me. Not this time. The motel smelled like chlorine and loneliness. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, my duffel bag at my feet, the box of unread letters beside me. I hadn't planned to stay more than a night in this town, but now I wasn't sure. Outside, rain tapped softly on the window, like a memory trying to get back in. I picked up one of the letters. The postmark read Camp Phoenix, Kabul. I remembered that one, where I dislocated my shoulder on a supply run and spent 2 nights in a makeshift medical tent listening to distant explosions. I held the letter to my chest for a moment before tossing it onto the growing pile. They had 20 years to care. I had 20 reasons not to. I lay back, let the ceiling fan's hum fill the silence. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but the voicemail pinged right after. It was Amber. "Hey, Nat, it's me. Look, I didn't know Mom kept the letters. I thought she read them. I kept one. Just one. You sent it after your promotion to captain. I still have it. If you want it, it's yours." I stared at the screen. Amber, the sister who once stole my prom dress, the one who told our friends I was emotionally unstable after boot camp. She kept a letter. Why? I hesitated, then texted her back. "Where?" 10 minutes later, I was back in my rental car, engine sputtering as I pulled up outside her house. Not the childhood home. This one was newer, colder. All glass and granite, not a memory in sight. Amber opened the door slowly, holding a manila envelope. She didn't say anything at first, just offered it to me like a peace offering, or a dare. I took it. Inside was my handwriting again, slightly faded, the paper folded but unwrinkled. But something felt off. I flipped it over and saw the back had been torn, then taped. I peeled back the edge. My stomach dropped. Someone had sliced the letter in half. Only the bottom portion remained, my signature, my rank, a sentence cut off midway. "Just hope one day you'll be proud." That was it. The rest was gone. "I didn't do that," Amber said quietly. I looked up. Her voice trembled. "Mom found it. She said she didn't want reminders in the house. I asked if I could keep it. She let me, but only if I agreed to never bring it up." I laughed once, bitter. "You were always better at silence." Amber flinched. Before I turned to go, she called after me. "You were gone, Nat. We didn't know how to hold space for you." I paused at the door. "You didn't have to hold space, just not erase it." Then I left, again. But this time, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking towards something they couldn't touch. The envelope still sat in the passenger seat as I pulled into the church parking lot. It was empty, quiet, midweek lull, just me and the wind. I hadn't been back here since Amber's wedding. I didn't go inside then. I wasn't invited, but I remembered the basement. The dusty Sunday schoolroom, the closets with leftover decorations, and an old corkboard that used to hold photos of community heroes. For one brief year, mine was there too, after my first deployment. A picture of me in desert camo, shaking hands with the mayor. They called me Local Girl, Global Mission. I had to know if it was still there. The back door creaked open without resistance. Everything smelled of paper and damp carpet. I found the basement light and made my way down the stairs. The air was thick with time. There it was. The board still hung on the far wall. Newer photos had taken over. Choir kids, food drives, Amber with a check from the bank she worked at. I scanned every corner, every row. Nothing. I turned to leave. Then I saw it, wedged between the filing cabinet and the wall, behind a stack of cardboard signs, the old version of the board. Dusty, stained, forgotten. I pulled it free. My photo was still there, pinned behind a curling paper. But someone had taken a marker to the label. Where it once read Captain Natalie Green, it now read Unknown. My chest tightened. Rage stirred somewhere deep, quiet but sharp. It wasn't enough to be forgotten. They had to unname me. There was a file box under the table marked Archive. I opened it on instinct. Inside were programs from community events, newspaper clippings, letters. Near the bottom, folded in half, was a typed sheet labelled Press Release, Military Recognition Night. My name was on it, clearly, bold. And beneath it, crossed out with red pen, was a handwritten note. Remove before print. Family declined participation. I stared at those 5 words until they blurred. They had been given the chance to acknowledge me. And they refused. I sat on the cold floor, the press release in my lap, the altered photo board beside me. They didn't just forget me, they edited me out. And for what? To preserve the image of a family without blemish? One that stayed tidy, unbothered, unscandalised by a daughter who chose service over Sunday brunch? I didn't cry. Instead, I took a pen from my bag and rewrote my name on that label. Black ink, bold letters, Captain Natalie Green. I pinned it back in place and stood tall, even if no one would see it, because I saw it. And for the first time in years, I believed it mattered. The call came just after sunrise, as fog still hugged the road outside my motel window. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number, no voicemail. But something in me said yes, just this once. "Natalie Green?" the voice asked. I straightened. "Speaking." "This is Lieutenant Colonel Jason Forrester. I'm calling from the Office of National Honours, Department of Defence. You've been nominated for the Pathfinder Medal, Service Distinction, Strategic Excellence in Field Operations, and critical contributions to international peacekeeping during Operation Phoenix Ark." I sat down slowly. "That's a lot of words," he chuckled. "That's military for you. The President will be presenting it personally. We'd like you to attend the National Honours Ceremony in DC 3 weeks from today. Travel and lodging covered." For a second I thought it was a prank, some cruel joke. "Wait," I said. "Who nominated me?" There was a pause. "Your former commanding officer, Major Harlan Quinn. He submitted the file before he passed. Said your strategies saved over 32 lives during the siege at Sector 12. The committee unanimously approved it." I felt something shift in my chest. That deployment nearly broke me. I never thought anyone noticed what I did there, especially not after Quinn's heart attack last year. I agreed, numbly. He gave me the details, logistics, security protocols. My hands barely wrote them down. After we hung up, I sat in silence, not for glory, not for applause, but because for once, someone saw me. Then, hours later, the news broke. CNN teased a segment, honouring unsung heroes, the woman behind Phoenix Ark. They didn't use my name in the promo, just a silhouette photo and the phrase, "She changed the tide of war." My phone buzzed. texts from old colleagues, commanders, a few friends from boot camp. But what made me freeze, what made my stomach twist, was the message from Amber. I saw the CNN teaser. Was that about you? No punctuation. Just curiosity. Not pride. Not excitement. And then, barely an hour later, another headline surfaced on a local affiliate station. Sister of prominent veteran to represent family at presidential ceremony. There was a photo. Amber, in a navy blue suit, standing in front of our childhood house, smiling. The caption below read, Amber Green to speak at ceremony honouring her sister's sacrifice. I stared at the article until the words blurred into static. Amber stood there, beaming, as if she'd marched in my boots, spilled blood in my sand, buried my dead. The interview aired that evening. I watched it alone in my motel room, lights off, jaw clenched. The anchor smiled warmly. Amber, what was it like growing up with someone so brave? Amber gave a small laugh, practiced. My sister's always been intense. She never did anything halfway, even as a kid. We didn't always understand her choices, but we knew she had purpose. The camera zoomed slightly, catching her misty eyes. She couldn't be here today, but I carry her story with me. I'm proud to speak for her. There it was. Not a mention of my name, not one syllable. Amber spoke as if I were a myth, some noble ghost, something tragic and sealed. The broadcast cut to B-roll footage, flags waving, children holding signs that read, "Thank you, hero." A choir rehearsed a patriotic hymn. Then another image appeared, a grainy silhouette from an old base photo. It was me. No face, just outline. No name, just her. I turned off the TV. The walls of the motel room closed in. The letters I'd kept on the bed now felt heavier, useless, like echoes no one would answer. I opened one, finally, the one from South Korea. I'd written it after surviving a winter training disaster where 3 soldiers nearly froze because I rerouted supply lines through a frozen pass, breaking protocol but saving lives. I wrote, I know I'm hard to love. Maybe I'm not meant to be soft. But I've always hoped someone would see me for more than my silence. Amber had taken that silence and filled it with her own voice. I pulled up the official announcement for the National Honours Ceremony. My name was finally there, Captain Natalie Green. Still, nowhere in the press coverage had they shown my face. Amber had become the lens. Then late that night, a message popped into my inbox, private, no subject line. From Unknown Journalist 88. The message read, I know the woman in that CNN teaser isn't the one getting the medal. I know you are. I have footage from Sector 12. You deserve to be seen. If you want the world to know the truth, I'm ready to help. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about reclaiming something they tried once again to bury. And this time, I wouldn't stay silent. The marble pillars of the Kennedy Center rose like silent witnesses. The banners fluttered in the July wind, red, white, and proud. National Honours Ceremony was printed in clean gold lettering as if valor could be polished like brass. I stood at the edge of the crowd, invisible in a room built for applause. I wore a dark suit, no medals, no insignia, not even my name pinned to my chest. Just a small chain around my neck, the silver tag Eliza had given me last year. You earned this, Mom, not them. Rows of guests filled the great hall. Decorated officers, families beaming with borrowed pride, politicians rehearsing their claps. On the far side, press cameras blinked red like hungry eyes. I spotted them before they saw me. Amber stood near the front in another polished navy outfit, flanked by Mom and Dad. Amber's hand clutched the program booklet like it was sacred scripture. She looked calm, confident, in control. Mum wore her church pearls. Dad wore a flag pin on his lapel, the same one he once refused to fly for me. None of them knew I was there, They hadn't asked. They hadn't thought I'd show up. Or maybe they didn't want me to. The announcer's voice echoed through the chamber. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the President of the United States." Everyone stood. My heart did not. He stepped onto the stage, calm, practiced, the face of a nation. A hush fell over the room. Flags rippled gently behind him. The silence was surgical. He began to speak. "Today we honour not only the warriors who carried burdens we'll never fully understand, but also those whose legacies were nearly lost." A pause. My breath caught. This next honoree served with distinction during Operation Phoenix Arc, leading a unit that held their ground when all others fell. Her tactics saved lives. Her silence saved morale. Her name, until recently, was nearly erased. Chairs creaked. A few heads turned, confused, curious. Amber leaned forward, waiting, hands clasped in false humility. "But today," the President said, voice sharper now, "we remember, we restore, we recognise Captain Natalie Rose Green." Gasps rippled through the room. The spotlight turned. It didn't land on Amber. It landed on me. The spotlight felt like a second sun, hot and blinding, but I didn't flinch. I walked down the centre aisle, each step echoing louder than the applause that hadn't started yet. Because no one clapped at first. They stared. Amber's smile froze in place. Mum's hand tightened on her pearls. Dad blinked like someone had unplugged the world. I saw their mouths move, silent words forming. "She's here? How? That's not possible." I kept walking. The President extended his hand as I reached the stage. I shook it firmly, meeting his eyes. He nodded, not just in protocol, but in something deeper, acknowledgement. Behind us, the screen lit up. Not Amber's speech, not a generic flag montage. It was me, grainy footage from Sector 12, helmet on, flak vest stained, barking orders under fire, pulling a wounded soldier across rubble, mapping coordinates in blood on broken concrete. The clip was raw, real, unmistakable. Someone in the back gasped, then someone clapped. Then the room exploded into thunderous applause. The President waited, then leaned toward the mic. For too long, her story was told by others. Today, she tells it herself. He stepped aside. I looked out over the crowd. Senators, generals, families holding tissues and programs like shields. But my eyes went straight to the third row where Amber sat, pale, stunned. She mouthed something. I couldn't read it, but I didn't need to. I turned to the podium. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need notes. I just said, "I was never gone. You just stopped looking." Then I saluted, crisp, clean, complete. The room rose as one. Not for a story they'd been told, but for the one they finally saw. The medal was heavier than I expected. It sat in a velvet box on the hotel nightstand, glowing softly in the afternoon light, like a reward and a relic all at once. I hadn't opened a single message since the ceremony. My phone buzzed for hours. Texts, voicemails, social media pings, most from people I hadn't heard from in a decade. "So proud of you." "Didn't know you were such a badass. Amber must be thrilled." I didn't answer any of them. Just after sunset, there was a knock at the hotel door. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I already knew. Amber stood there, hair pulled back tight, lips pressed in a line between hope and shame. Behind her, Mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. Dad stayed back, half-shadowed, but present, which, for him, was something. "Natalie," Amber started, "we wanted to say..." "No," I said, quiet but firm. "You wanted to be seen, just not with me standing next to you." Amber winced. "That's not fair." "No," I corrected. "What's not fair is erasing someone and then pretending you missed them." Mum stepped forward. "Sweetheart, we didn't know." "You knew," I cut in. "You just didn't want to know." The silence that followed was thick, awkward. a fragile truce of people standing on old ground that had long since crumbled beneath them. Dad finally spoke. "You deserved that medal. We're proud, really." I looked him in the eye. "Then why did you cross out my name on the church board?" He didn't answer. He looked down. Shame finally found its way past his collar. Amber's voice cracked. "I was wrong about everything. You were out there building something while we were pretending to hold something together." I waited. She pulled something from her bag, a small velvet pouch. Inside was the old silver bracelet, the one I'd left behind when I enlisted. "It's yours," she said. "It always was." I didn't reach for it. Instead, I said, "I have my own now." From my pocket, I pulled a much newer version, thinner, engraved on the inside. "To Mom, who never surrendered, Eliza." Amber blinked. "Who's Eliza?" Mum glanced at me, confusion creeping in. I smiled, soft but unshaken. "My daughter." Amber blinked again, slower this time. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Mum stepped back slightly, as if the word daughter carried physical weight. Dad finally looked up, voice hoarse. You have a child?" "I do," I said evenly. "She's 16, smart, stubborn, speaks 3 languages and fixes radios better than most techs in the army." Mum clutched her purse tighter. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I tilted my head, measured my breath. "Because you wouldn't have asked. Just like you didn't ask about the letters, or the deployment, or the medals." Amber stepped forward, her voice suddenly urgent. "Where is she? Does she know about us?" "She knows what she needs to," I said. "She knows her mother served, that she was raised by truth, not guilt, that she was born from strength, not shame." Dad sank into the chair beside the wall, hands laced together. I could see it dawning on him. The legacy he tried to erase was already multiplying beyond his control. Amber's voice wavered. "Can we meet her?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I studied them, their regret, their panic, their desperation not to lose what they'd only just realized they wanted. But this wasn't a movie. There was no neat resolution, no tidy family photo waiting to be taken. I pulled out my phone and tapped a photo. Eliza in uniform, just after a junior ROTC exercise. Covered in sweat, smiling like a storm had passed through her and left her stronger. I held the screen up. "You already have?" Amber squinted, startled. "Wait, is that—" "The young cadet who handed the president my medal," I said. "That's Eliza." Their jaws dropped in unison. "She's been watching you longer than you knew," I said. "She knows exactly who deserves a seat at her table." Mum began to speak, but I raised a hand. "I didn't come back for closure. I came back to reclaim what you tried to rewrite." I took the velvet pouch from Amber's hand, not for the bracelet inside, but to set it back in her palm. "You can keep this, a relic of a version of me that died in your silence." I turned toward the door. Amber whispered, "Can we ever fix this?" I looked over my shoulder, the air between us thick with everything unspoken. "No," I said gently, "but you can learn to live with it, just like I did." The house I returned to wasn't the one I'd grown up in. It was the one I built with my own hands. It stood on the edge of a decommissioned base in Virginia, once a barracks building, now rebuilt into something quiet and deliberate. Inside were polished floors, old military maps pinned to corkboards, and a kitchen that always smelled like black coffee and motor oil. This was home, not because it had my name on a mailbox, but because here no one tried to erase it. Eliza was already waiting when I walked in. Hair tied up in a knot, her fatigue jacket flung across the chair. She was bent over a shortwave radio, tuning frequencies with careful fingers. She looked up when she heard the door. "You didn't punch anyone, right?" she asked. I smirked. "Not even a little." She nodded. "Cool, then you get a cookie, but you gotta share." She tossed me a pack of Oreos. I caught it one-handed, tossed one back at her. For a moment we didn't talk about the ceremony, or the medal, or the fact that I'd faced 3 ghosts in one hotel hallway. We just sat on the floor, back against the cabinet, passing cookies and stories like fire between us. Then she asked the one thing I knew was coming. "Do you think they'll try again?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "They might," I said. "They'll say the right words, ask the right questions, maybe even mean some of it." She nodded, quiet for a beat. "Would you ever let them in?" I considered it, not just the idea of forgiveness, but what it meant to truly open a door that had once been nailed shut. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe someday, but I'm not building this house for them." She smiled then, small but bright. "Good, because I already called dibs on the guest room for my squad leader." I laughed, and for the first time in days it didn't sound hollow. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Slowly she unwrapped it and held it out. It was my original dog tag, the one I thought I'd lost in Kabul. "I found it in your old box," she said. "Took it with me to training, kept it close. Hope that's okay." I didn't answer right away, just held it, ran my thumb over the engraved letters, my name, my blood type, my serial number, the proof I'd existed, even when no one back home wanted to remember. "It's more than okay," I said. "It means you know exactly who you are and who you come from." A week later, the doors of the academy opened. The walls were still raw with drywall seams and paint fumes, the budget only half granted by the Veterans Fund. But it stood, proudly, defiantly, the Rose Initiative, a training and mentorship hub for female service members from disadvantaged or ignored backgrounds. My dream, now brick and breath. I walked the hall slowly, watching new cadets file in with fresh haircuts, worn boots, and eyes too young to carry what they already had. Eliza was among them, but not beside me. She walked in with her own unit now. She didn't introduce herself as Natalie's daughter. She introduced herself as Cadet First Class Eliza Green, Radio Comm Lead. I watched her from the observation wing, hands gesturing as she briefed a group on comms protocol, her voice calm but firm. She was me, but freer. Later that afternoon she stopped by my office, dropped a folder on my desk. "Application for Officer Candidate School," she said. I flipped it open, every box filled, every line pressed hard in ink, determined. "You ready for this?" I asked. She shrugged. "I was born ready, just needed the paperwork to catch up." I smiled. "You're not running from anything, are you?" She looked at me dead on. "No, Mom, I'm walking toward it, just like you taught me." I nodded. "Then go raise some hell." She saluted, half joking, then left the room. After she was gone, I sat back, letting the quiet settle in. I glanced at the medal, now framed behind glass on the wall, not for pride, not for proof, but as a reminder that silence can bury, but truth revives. On my desk sat the last letter I'd written to my parents, unsent. It started with, "I forgive you," but I never finished it, not yet. Some doors don't close with slams, they close with stillness, and sometimes they don't need to open again. The morning of the graduation, the sky was a soft grey, the kind of sky that doesn't threaten a storm, just reminds you it could come any time. I stood at the edge of the parade field, coffee in hand, boots in gravel. The rows of cadets marched sharp and synchronized, boots thudding like a single heartbeat. Eliza led them, not in my shadow, not under my name, as herself. The final salute came, caps tossed. Applause rolled over the hills like thunder with nowhere to land. Families rushed in with signs, hugs, messy tears. I watched from a short distance. Eliza caught my eye, nodded once, and went to celebrate with her team. She didn't need me beside her in that moment, and that's how I knew I'd done it right. After the crowd thinned, I returned to my office. On the desk, waiting patiently, was the one letter I had never dared to open. The one my father left with Amber years ago. The envelope had yellowed, the seal cracked. I almost burned it, but I didn't. Inside was one sentence, no greeting, no sign-off. I didn't know how to love someone I didn't understand. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I meant to. Then I folded it back, slid it into my drawer, not out of forgiveness, not even out of closure, but because some wounds stop bleeding even if they never heal. That evening, Eliza joined me on the porch. We didn't speak for a while. Just watched the wind play with the flag we'd hung that morning, stitched not from patriotism but memory. She held out a small wooden box. "What's this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Tradition, one green to another." Inside was the silver bracelet I'd left with Amber. Reclaimed, cleaned, restored. "You got it back," she smiled. "Didn't ask permission." I clasped it on, not as a return to who I was, but as recognition of who I'd become. Then she asked, "Do you think they ever think about you?" I didn't hesitate. They think about the version of me they could control, the one who smiled small and stayed quiet, but the one they buried. That one rose. Eliza leaned her head on my shoulder. That one raised me. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows on a land we had claimed not by force, but by survival. And as the light faded, I whispered, not to her, but to the wind. They erased my name from their history, but not from the world, not from her.